If you clicked on this video, chances are you're at least a little interested in the Hasselblad Xpan just like I am. As the camera has grown in popularity over the last few years, prices have skyrocketed and pushed a lot of potential buyers out of the market. I first heard of the Hasselblad Xpan a few years ago when prices were still high, but not quite as high as they are currently. I've had a few opportunities to purchase Xpans in the past, but ultimately I was scared to pull the trigger on one with the fear the electronics would fail and I'd have a $4,000 to $5,000 paperweight on my camera shelf. With that being said, I still dream of owning an Xpan someday and find myself checking Facebook Marketplace, Reddit, Fred Miranda, and other sites basically every day just in case I find that deal of a lifetime. So while I don't own an Xpan of my own right now, I want to familiarize myself with the aspect ratio so if I do get one in the future, I'll feel more at home with how to compose with such a wide format. So how am I doing that? Well, as you've seen, one of my methods is revisiting old work and cropping the photos to a 65:24 aspect ratio, but another method is to shoot that same aspect ratio in camera. And as of right now, the camera I've been using to do that is the Fujifilm GFX 100S. As you can see from the photos, my wife and I, as well as some friends that were visiting town, went around and just explored Nashville. We stopped in Printers Alley and Broadway, and the camera that I had was this guy. This is the Fujifilm GFX 100S, and the lens that I had on it was the 63mm f2.8. And what I will say is, in order to get a, like the standard field of view that you would get from a Hasselblad Xpan, I kind of wish I had a wider lens. So you might know this, but the Hasselblad Xpan is essentially a medium format rangefinder that shoots only 35mm film. You're essentially shooting two 35mm frames side by side. Your horizontal aspect ratio or your horizontal size is 65mm, which is getting close to what you'd get from a 6x7 negative. But again, you can only shoot 35mm film from the Xpan. And since it is essentially a medium format camera, you don't have the 1x crop factor that you would get from a standard 35mm film camera. The crop factor for the Xpan is 0.62 times, which means the most common lens that comes with Xpans, the 45mm f4, would essentially give you a 25 and a half-ish horizontal field of view on a full frame camera, but your vertical field of view is still equivalent to a 45mm lens. So if I wanted to get the same or at least a similar field of view on my GFX, I would need anywhere from a 30 to a 32mm lens, and that should get me around the same horizontal field of view as the Xpan with the 45mm. However, like I said before, this is the 63mm, which gets me around a 50mm field of view on a full frame camera. Another lens for the Xpan system is the 90mm f4, which, applying that 0.62 crop factor would get you a 55mm horizontal field of view. So by using the 63mm lens with the Xpan crop factor, I should be getting around the same or at least a very similar horizontal field of view to the Xpan with the 90. I hope that all makes sense. So yes, while I would rather have a wider lens, this combo still worked great and I was able to take some pictures that I really like. So moving away from Nashville, these next couple images I'm showing you are from a local waterfall that I went to. And unlike the Nashville photos, none of those images were shot with the 63mm lens. They were shot with some vintage Olympus OM lenses, particularly the 24mm f2.8 and the 55mm f1.2. Now, neither one of these lenses fully covers the entire sensor of the GFX. However, the 55mm does do a better job than the 24 if you're talking about the full sensor. However, using the Xpan aspect ratio crop in this camera, both lenses perform good enough. Again, the 55 does perform better than the 24, but the 24 still is, like I said, good enough on the GFX sensor. So why am I even making this video? Because obviously I don't own an Xpan. Well, I kind of made it as a way for me to experiment with, shooting and seeing in the 65:24 aspect ratio. Like I mentioned earlier, the Xpan or the Fujifilm TX1 are dream cameras, are holy grail cameras for a lot of people, including myself. And I just kind of wanted to get a sense of what it might be like to kind of capture and see the world in such a wide aspect ratio. And I will be honest, the aspect ratio that the Xpan shoots in is honestly a little bit wider than I particularly like in terms of a panoramic aspect ratio. My favorite aspect ratio for panos is 2:1, and I believe the Xpan is closer to 2.7:1. It's almost 3:1. I'll put the exact number on the screen, but yeah, it's a little bit wider than I think I would want to use on a regular basis, but it does work really well for a lot of scenes. I think you just have to be a little bit more creative with the way that you're framing things. That's one thing I have heard with the Xpan is it's a very different experience because it's not as straightforward since you are seeing so much horizontally. So would I actually buy an Xpan? This is a hard question for me to answer because I don't actually know. Like I mentioned earlier, I have had a few opportunities to purchase an Xpan, but I ultimately didn't because I was just scared that the electronics would fail. Hopefully sometime in the future, there will be someone who will, create more motherboards or, remanufacture, electronics. I doubt Hasselblad would ever, but, maybe there would be some independent companies that would be interested in doing that. And maybe then you could get that reliability up. But again, I was just really scared that, if I were to purchase one, it could last me 10 years or it could last me a week or two. And you just never really know. And it's just a lot of money to spend on something that that has a lot of uncertainty with its how long it might last. I feel like the only way that I could get myself to purchase an Xpan is if one, I had a lot of money, and two, I was already satisfied with all of the gear that I owned. And by that I mean all of my boxes were checked and all the photography needs that I had were met with the equipment that I already owned. But most importantly, again, if I had a lot of money, because the hypothetical amount of money that I would spend on an Xpan, I'd honestly prefer to put into a trip. I'd rather be in Italy, the Italian Dolomites, shooting with the gear that I already own, as opposed to shooting around Nashville with an Xpan. Nothing against Nashville, I think you guys get what I'm trying to say, but I'd rather be exploring a new place, someplace that's, brand new to me, that's really cool, that's interesting, that inspires me with the gear that I already have, as opposed to spending all that money with a camera that, will allow me to just shoot where I'm at, like spending all my money on one camera and not being able to see new things. I'd rather put my money into experiences over gear. So do you guys agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. Also, this is me kind of shooting my shot. Like I mentioned, I live in the Nashville area. If you live anywhere here and you have an Xpan that you'd be willing to let me just shoot with, or even if you don't live in Nashville, if you just live somewhere in the US or even internationally and you'd be willing to let me shoot with one, I'd love to, if I ever travel to where you are, I'd love to like meet up for a photo walk or something and, just shoot with you. We can grab coffee and you can let me borrow your camera for, an afternoon or something. If not, whatever, I'm just putting that out there. I'm just putting that out there because, again, I love the opportunity to shoot with a Hasselblad Xpan. I had a lot of fun going through and, revisiting my old archive. I honestly spent like a week going through and re-editing a lot of photos. I don't know if you guys are like this, but I feel like every few months I am dissatisfied or unsatisfied with the way that my images are looking. So I'll like go through and re-edit them and like practice editing and all that stuff anyway. So the photos that you're seeing in this video, I've kind of like found a new updated way that I like to edit my photos. Who knows how long that'll last, because again, I feel like I go through my archive all the time and re-edit photos because I'm I don't like the way that my photos are looking. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys liked this video or the photos that you saw and would like to check out more of my work, I'll leave my Instagram on the screen right now, as well as a link to my Instagram and my website down below. If you've made it this far, special thank you to you. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I'm gonna end it. So thank you guys again. I really do appreciate it. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.